That sounds like a no.
Mr. Boone, is there anyone online to speak?
There are people online, but no one signed up to speak
Okay.
beforehand.
We'll go right into our public hearing then. This evening, we have a public hearing on ordinance amending Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan Land Use Diagram, map and title 14, Land Use District Map. This is a type 4 legislative procedure. The City Council will make a final decision upon the ordinance based on the completed record, including the Planning Commission recommendation and testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings will be recorded. I will now open this public hearing for an ordinance amending the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan Land Use Diagram, map and title 14 Land Use District Map at 7:07 p.m. In accordance with state law and city land use procedures, I will summarize tonight's type 4 legislative procedure and the standards of review. First, staff will review the staff report and identify the applicable substantive criteria for the city's comprehensive plan and/or state of Oregon statewide planning goal that apply to the proposal. Staff will also review the Planning Commission's recommendation on this proposal. Following staff's presentation, we will take public testimony and then return to staff to present additional material or comments based on the testimony. Following that, council will close the public hearing. Your testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the identified substantive criteria or other substantive criteria in the comprehensive plan, development code, or statewide planning goals, which you believe apply to this application. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements of, or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker or other interested parties opportunity to respond may preclude an appeal of a decision on this proposal at issue. For anyone wishing to speak, if you are accessing the meeting in person or using video, please raise your hand to be recognized. If you are accessing the meeting using only audio, please announce that you would like to speak. When called upon to speak, you must be recognized by the presiding officer and state your name and address for the public record. We ask that each speaker limit themselves to no more than 3 minutes. Presentations will be timed, and you will be informed when your allotted time has expired. All speakers exceeding the time limit will be asked by the presiding officer to immediately conclude their remarks. If you do not finish your presentation, be sure to provide a copy of your statement to staff. Written testimony may be offered and will be considered and made part of the record. In order to minimize repetitive testimony, organizations are encouraged to have only one person speak for the group. Each person may testify only once unless called upon at the request of the council member to respond to a question. Conflicts of interest. Before we begin, the chair and councilors are recognized to disclose any conflicts of interest in ex parte contacts that we have or had with the proposal or applicant. Does any counselor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in this matter? I see none. Public hearing for ordinance amending the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan Land Use Diagram Map and Title 14 Land Use District Map for 2110 West Main Street. Assistant City Planner, Allison Crowe.
Good evening, councilors and mayor. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive comments on the proposed amendment of the Comprehensive Plan Land Use Diagram Map and the Title 14 Cottage Grove Development Code Land Use District Map for 1.63 acres of land owned by April and Kyle Kishen at 2110 West Main Street. This application is to change the comprehensive plan designation of H, high-density residential, to M, medium-density residential, and apply city zoning of R2, which is medium-density residential. One comment was received in support of this application, and one comment was received from both the Housing Land Advocates and the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, which called out the Goal 10 findings. Staff took their comments into consideration and published a revised staff report. After consideration of the revised staff report, the Housing Land Advocates and the Fair Housing Council of Oregon are satisfied with staff's findings. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on October 18, 2023, and recommended approval to council. It is now appropriate that council hold the public hearing on the attached draft ordinance. This ordinance has been available for more than 1 week prior to this meeting, and staff is recommending adoption.
We will now take public testimony. Kathleen?
Well, hi, Councilmen and ladies and Mayor. I don't know if I'll be technically correct on how I present myself. I didn't know it would be so technical. So, forgive me if I don't say something correctly. And I had spoke to a few folks here already, and I have been corrected about thinking that, most of the homes would be built in the next few years, and not knowing that it's going to be an extended period, which actually 2035 or 2035 is in 15 years. Well, anyway, I've lived here in Cottage Grove since 2004, and at that time there was 5,000, near 5,000 folks that lived here, and the population has, really influx, and right now it seems like there's so much traffic on the roads, and our roads need desperate care. And I mean, even being downtown, the traffic was stopped at the Main Street 99 and the intersection there. And like I was stopped completely way back a little bit further than Dairy Mart. And, that's a lot of traffic. I mean, it's not always, just certain times of the day. And then also the stores. It seems like there's so many people in the stores. And the parking lots are much fuller than they used to be. And then I'm wondering about the infrastructure as the roads, big time, and many more vehicles, like 700 more vehicles, like 2 per family unit, I'm figuring. And then, oh dear, waste management, water supply, under what, drought possibly, the sanitation, health system, power supply, blackouts, are we prepared for all the homes? And I guess I have to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Does staff have any comments?
Mayor, Council. So I wanted to touch on at least 2 of those comments. The referenced housing needs analysis was the projection from 2018 to 2038. It's not necessarily those homes are going to be built in that entire time period. It's just the projection of what was necessary for our city. In my analysis, we're actually doing really well with the new purchase of the parcels. Just the development that we've had, we're actually on track to meet that much sooner. The second comment that I'd like to make was the mention of additional residents and infrastructure, potential issues with that. I would like to remind council that this is actually a down zone, so it would allow for single family dwellings, whereas the current high density designation does not. It more lends to multi-family.
Any other comments? All right, since that was our last citizen, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing at 7:16 PM. Consent agenda
Move approval.
has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolutions and ordinances. Item A, resolution adopting supplemental budget for fiscal year 2023 to 2024 and making appropriations. Staff report by Ms. Likens.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, ORS allows us to hold a supplemental budget process. Included in that was the notice of receipt and meeting to hold this supplemental budget consideration this evening. What this does essentially will take money that has been placed in the general fund contingency with $15,500 and appropriate it to be spent for the purpose that it was intended in 21. We discussed this at budget time, as I recall, and we weren't certain at the time as to what the funding agencies would want done with the money. I received confirmation from the Ford Family Foundation that they wanted it to continue to go for the same purpose. That's what this would do. So after consideration of any public comment, I would suggest that we make any necessary adjustments and adopt the resolution.
Resolution number?
2119.
Counselor Irvin.
Mayor, move the council adopt resolution 2119.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Any discussion?
Quick question. So I'm assuming we're in a little different format. We used to have kind of the before and after numbers. So I'm assuming that the 13.5 is the new line item for this item, and then that the 358, 315 is the new balance of
That's
the
correct.
contingency after that
Right,
change.
so you're actually appropriating those amounts of money for those specific funds.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
We have a motion with a second. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Yes.
New
Counselor
job.
Dreer?
Aye.
Counselor Irvin?
Aye.
Counselor Fleck?
Aye.
Counselor Merryday?
Aye.
Counselor Savage?
Aye.
Mayor, Counselor Stinnett?
Aye.
Mayor Sol.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Resolution carries. Item B, ordinance amending the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan Land Use Diagram, Map and Title 14, Land Use District Map for Kyle and April Kishen at 2110 West Main Street. Staff report by Assistant City Planner, Ms. Crowe.
Good evening again, Councilors, Mayor. Council has now held a public hearing on the proposed amendment of the Comprehensive Plan Land Use Diagram Map and the Title 14 Cottage Grove Development Code Land Use District Map to redesignate 1.63 acres of land owned by Kyle and April Kishen on West Main Street from the current comprehensive plan designation of H, high-density residential, to M, medium-density residential, and apply city zoning of R2, medium-density residential. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the attached ordinance on October 18, 2023, and recommended approval to council. And City Council held a public hearing on the attached ordinance on November 13, 2023. It is now appropriate that council consider the ordinance.
Do we have an ordinance number?
3178.
Counselor Flack.
Madam Mayor, I move that the council adopt resolution 3178.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, ordinance, I apologize.
Amend my second.
Any discussion? Counselor Merriday.
Assistant Planner, it seemed from my reading that one of the main motivations for this was not so much a rate zoning change as to be allowed for access to the city sewer. Did that play into this? Or did I misread? It sounded like it was more they were unable to repair their septic system since it was so close to the sewer.
Councilor Mayor. So That was not the intention of this. When this was annexed in 2004, the underlying zoning was not applied. So for potential development, if there was to be any, they do need a zone. So as far as septic goes, that was not my understanding of this application. It was simply for potential for either partition, new dwelling, any development.
It was mentioned there, and I was.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just unsure.
Sure. It references to the fact of if there was new development or if that septic failed, they do have to hook up to city services.
Counselor Stennett?
Thank you. Can you speak to the nature of the comments from the two housing advocacy organizations? I didn't see those in here.
Of course, Councilor Mayor. So their issue that they raised was my goal 10 findings, which is housing for the state, were not sufficient enough to justify this down zone. As we all know, housing is a large part of Oregon's legislature right now, and it raised attention to that. After further analysis, this parcel was not in our buildable lands inventory because it's so encumbered by riparian corridor setbacks and floodplain. So it wasn't actually considered in that. So because of that, this down zone does not affect the high density residential lands that we have. So it's not technically taking away from that buildable lands.
Thank you.
Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Counselor Fleck.
Aye.
Counselor Murray,
Aye.
Counselor Savage,
Aye.
Counselor Stinnett.
Aye.
Counselor Dreer.
Aye.
Mayor Silsby.
Aye. Thank you. Item C, ordinance amending the City of Cottage Grove Municipal Code, Title 14, Land Use, the citywide zoning map for Double H Investments, LLC, ZC2-23, map tax lot 20-03-32-00-00504. Land partition plat number 2019-P2897, Parcel 1, staff report by Ms. Crowe.
Councilors, Mayor. At the City Council meeting held on September 25, 2023, Council adopted ordinance number 3176, annexing 5.06 acres into the City of Cottage Grove. As a requirement of annexation per Section 18.04.090 of the Cottage Grove Municipal Code, the property owner is required to apply for a zone change of the subject property to redesignate the zoning from county to city zoning. Per subsection 14.47.400.1, the Planning Commission shall review and decide upon land use district map changes that do not involve comprehensive plan map amendments, through a type 3 application procedure. The Planning Commission held a public hearing for ZC 2-23 on October 18, 2023, voting 5-0 in favor of applying the R1 zone to the subject property. As the Planning Commission does not have the ability to adopt an ordinance, Council is now being asked to ratify the Planning Commission's decision to approve ZC 2-23 by adopting the prepared draft ordinance. This ordinance has been available for more than 1 week prior to this meeting, and staff is recommending adoption.
Counselor Irvin.
Thank you, Mayor. Move that the council adopt ordinance 3179.
Second?
We have a motion with a second. Any discussion? The recorder, please call the roll.
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Murray,
Aye.
Counselor Savage, Counselor Stinnett.
Aye.
Counselor Dreer.
Aye.
Counselor Irvin.
Aye.
Mayor Silsby.
Aye. Motion passes. Business from the City Council. Item A, 2023 Municipal Court Report. The report by Judge Martin Fisher.
Good evening, council. Good to see you all again. I assume you got a copy of my report, so I won't read from it. There are just a few points I wanted to make that I noticed weren't in writing that I hadn't stuck in here. When we talked about the collection reduction from previous years, I neglected to include the previous year's numbers as a frame of reference, which I thought would be helpful. last year's collections were roughly $76,000, and the year before that was roughly $81,000, which was a record, I think, maybe at the time. This last year was $21,000. So that's a dramatic decrease, which is, I think, reflected in the overall decrease in citations in general, which was roughly 50%. Interestingly, though, is the fact that the specific categories of offenses I identified in that little table on page 2 stayed roughly the same as the previous year. There's some minor fluctuation, but it's not far off, which is an interesting observation when you consider the overall citations are down by half. What might be extrapolated from that is that the crime rate itself has not changed, because many of these crimes on here are ones that people call and report. Many of the other offenses we handle are the result of an officer interaction, a traffic stop. So I think a fair extrapolation is that some of the reduction is just because of the turmoil and turnover that has occurred in the past year or so in the police department. And as I said at the very end, I suspect after the new officers that complete their training and become more in tune with what's happening, we probably expect to see those numbers go back up. Probably not in 2025. We haven't had any trials. There is another component to that involves the officer turnover issues. Of course, we had one jury trial get canceled because the officer got terminated. We probably had closer to 10 cases get dismissed for the same reason, just not at the stage of having gotten assigned a trial. That will probably continue to be an issue for the next. It shouldn't be an issue for more than another 4 months at most, as some of the cases those officers were perhaps involved in reach a stage where something has to happen. And that's the last of those is probably coming up very soon. So we shouldn't see that being an issue after much longer. The big concern, of course, is the jail issue and the rather profound implications of how that has or has not worked. In large part, as I discussed, the issues around pre-trial, or in this case, actually pre-arraignment detention. I think I spelled it out here at length, so I won't belabor it. I spoke recently to the chief, and I believe that efforts will be forthcoming to hopefully rectify some of this, bureaucracy moves at the speed of bureaucracy. So I don't know how soon that can actually play out. There are obviously concerns about the wording of the contract, which the chief and I also talked about, where we have a contract that has a whole paragraph that is just a bunch of nonsense words, that is the portion that addresses who the Springfield jail holds and the issues with them having simply invented a completely new category that is in the contract. But again, this is a contract that the city and the police department negotiated. And so to whatever extent that's the contract, the court just has to sort of modify how we handle cases and adjust our expectations, which is not great. The one I'll call bright spot, which I guess is an odd way to view it, is our attendance issues have also shown themselves in the traffic side of our dock. Where years ago, we would have people lined up out into the lobby here. We had to have 2 court clerks. We had 50 people waiting to process their tickets. Now we maybe have 3, maybe 2, who show up, not weekly, in a month. And of those, there are probably between 20, I'd say between 15 and 25 cited. So this tiny fraction of the overall people cited are showing up. The bright spot, if you can call it that, is in traffic cases when people don't show up, they just lose. And so we get to assess the full fine. We make money on traffic when people don't come. So I guess that's a bright spot. It's sort of a strange bright spot. People probably should come because most people who do get their fines reduced. They get some of the charges dismissed. But if they don't want to come, we make the money. So aside from that, I am open to questions that I have to think there are problems.
Counselor Stennett.
Thank you. Are we collecting from traffic violations? And respectively?
That is probably all of our collections. So whatever the collection rate is, aside from DUIs, which have a mandatory fine, essentially all of our collections come from traffic, and in particular for people who don't show up. Because part of the process that plays out when a person doesn't show up is after receiving a handful of notices and opportunities to show up, aside from also owing the entire fine, that person's license is still suspended. It's basically the one category in the traffic realm we can still suspend for. So those people are suspended, and when people get a suspension notice, that gets their attention, and they can pay.
Counselor Irvin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Fisher, for giving this report and for being here. And my comments, I wish you not to take as any comment on your performance, because I've been nothing but satisfied over the years of working and being in court. I'm reading this report, on the backdrop of this fewer tools in the toolbox to hold people accountable. We don't have a jail. It looks like we're operating at about $155,000 a year loss. Can you, in your best judgment, give a case of why we should have a court?
That's a really good question, and something that I have frankly pondered. What was the case until this year, and this was the case when I served as the city prosecutor and as my time here, is that what we got was local accountability, and not just local accountability, but accountability. Most of what comes through our court would never see a courtroom if this court didn't exist. The police would cite these people into the Plain County Circuit Court, who would just turn around and, not file a charge, which is basically happened. So the idea that we at least, we still have some accountability. I mean, we still send people to jail. We still impose community service. It's just really getting fewer and further between. And probably does come a time where there has to be a discussion about, do we just stop enforcing and expecting any enforcement or accountability for crime here in Cottage Grove as a trade-off for just spending money? And I suspect that at some point, that's a real conversation that has to be held. Because in order for this to truly get back to the point where the city is holding people accountable, something's got to change. And my guess is that's going to cost money. Everything costs money. That's going to cost maybe a lot of money. The other, I guess, one important point that, again, I always felt was important, both as a prosecutor and as a judge here, was when we talk about local accountability, it doesn't mean just the sanctions local, jails local. It means that people are coming into a court in their community where the community kind of ethos is understood, and the personal interactions of people here are understood. The economic situation of people here are understood. You're not just a cattle call in circuit court. So we can at times craft an outcome that is maybe better for the community than just stamping a sentence. But again, at some point, the question becomes, how much is that worth?
Counselor Flack?
Well, for my 2 cents worth, it's, this is the core of what we do. I mean, public safety for me is our number one issue. And if we can't hold folks accountable, something short of felony, obviously felonies will still be prosecuted. But at the same time, we used to, for years, actually we would downgrade low-grade felonies to high-grade misdemeanors so we could hold folks accountable in our jail. And I think this benefits the individual as well as the community. I mean, we need to be able to get folks whatever services may be imposed by the court. We've talked about this before. Or doing community service, our agency welcomes folks, most folks, I should say, to come do community service, and we put them to work. And so I think this is a valuable component. It's hard to put a price more than just the dollar amount, but I do expect it to be successful. And if Springfield's a challenge, then maybe we look at Lane County Jail. I know that there's probably challenges with both, but I'm confident you folks will work it out. But for my 2 cents worth, this is a key piece of what we do. And so I absolutely support it 100%.
Counselor Stennett?
Thank you. So in your conclusion, it said it can be presumed that the prior year's unsettled nature of the police department's staffing situation. And then it says it can be fairly extrapolated that pending new officers completing training and finding their sea legs. Is that something you've spoken to the police department about? Did they share your sense of that? Or?
No, it's as we have watched new officers come in, you can see the ebb and flow in citations as personnel change, and you see it with new officers. There is some period where they're getting adapted, so they don't really write a lot of tickets. Then they go to the academy, and you don't see them for, I don't know, for like 3 months, maybe less, but they're gone. And then they come back and have to start getting comfortable. And part of what I anecdotally have understood to have happened, at least in the earlier part of this year and up fairly recently, that even though we were getting new officers in place, we were still so short that they couldn't be sent out to just like patrol traffic. There were other more important things, and they didn't have enough staff to cover it. Again, I don't know that. If that was really the case, that's more of just what I heard and kind of understand. But I've got to think that, I believe we have a handful of officers going through the academy now. I just think it's going to take time until they start becoming comfortable, and we have a large enough force again to cover everything.
Counselor Urban.
Thank you for allowing a second. Trying to comprehend the kind of the mechanisms of play. It sounds like traffic citations are what I was picking up was the only fine is the only revenue stream for the court. Is that more or less that's collectible?
Other
Even
than
in its low state.
DUIs, yeah.
So then the other, getting to Council Fleck's point, the other benefit is community service. And whatever effect of, is that the primary mechanism for corrective action taken by the court for non-traffic offenses and non-DUI?
Any more, that is probably more often sanctioned code than not. There's definitely been an increase in the number of cases that plead out and are sentenced to a community service option. Largely because, again, we don't have the jail space to send people who would otherwise have been sent, or be, frankly, even a short sentence, a weekend. Although I would say most people who are facing a weekend do serve. Although again, the policy with Springfield Jail is if you show up, let's say on Friday, and you have a 2-day sentence, let's say. You show up on Friday, you get released Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. So it's really an overnight, because Friday is the day, Saturday, 2 days. So even the efficacy of that sanction, when it's served, is still less.
Okay, so if the primary benefit to the city of Cottage Grove is community service, can you paint a picture of the reach of that? I mean, who is being served? We've heard community sharing. Who else?
The only other community service entity right now we use is the police department. They run a program that I presume, I've never done it, but I presume that they are out doing cleanup, graffiti, trash pickup, washing a police car. I maybe doing some landscaping work. I mean, I honestly don't know, but it's city work.
Thank you.
Counselor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor Salisbury. It sounds to me like, thank you for being here, by the way, and giving this report. It brings up lots of questions. It sounds like Springfield's jail is of use, but only on very specific parameters. So while we do have freedom available, it won't just take anybody that we would potentially deem necessary for jail. Is that a correct understanding?
Broadly, yes. The very specific category of the people who they will not take are people who have not yet been arraigned. There's another category regarding female inmates, and it's actually in the contract, that before they can be sent up, they have to be pre-cleared by the Springfield jail. And I don't know what that process is. I do know the one time, or the first time I think we sentenced a female to jail, the police didn't do that and took her up there in the jail to take her, at least at first. It was a whole thing. So I don't know what their criteria is, how it's screened. I believe it has to do with medical issues, probably. But again, that's a police jail.
Do we have any sort of data on how many folks we would have referred to jail, but are downgraded to community service, and then how many folks we are sending to jail in comparison?
No, and part of the reason is that the city prosecutor's office is fully cognizant of it. So the plea offers in cases that I believe would have included jail now often no longer. Because they understand we can't send every shoplifter at a jail or a gang. Which, I mean, that's not what we did. But if we had wanted to, we could have. And now the people who are being sentenced are people who have mandatory sentences, DUIs, and people who have sort of crossed that threshold of nothing else for us. So those are usually repeat offenders. And on occasion, people may be sentenced on a more significant offense.
So in your example of the shoplifter, would we give them a fine, will be able to collect on the fine, or the fines
No.
are really the bread and butter?
Right. We haven't imposed fines in those kinds of cases now in probably 2 years, maybe 3, because we discovered they're uncollectible. And it created an administrative hassle and cost that was totally justifiable. And as those people are largely extremely poor, usually unhoused, there's just no point in asking them to pay and spending court resources following up and asking them, why haven't you paid? And having you say, because I'm homeless and I have no money. Leading usually to an alternative sanction of community service as an offset. So essentially, we just stopped imposing the fine and went straight to the service side.
Are we seeing that people are completing their community service?
I wouldn't say anything has changed in the sense that people who are sentenced to community service, there is a category of them who are never going to do it. And it's usually the same people. Those are the people who ultimately we would send off to jail. Probably 70%, and this just, again, I don't keep track. I'm not sure the court does. We might, I can check. But I would bet 70% completed. Usually not on time, but eventually.
Thank you. One last follow-up question would be, this then begins the conversation of creative other avenues of being creative in helping people stay accountable, which you brought up earlier would be this scenario.
Right. For example, finding, and this is something we have struggled with sometimes, is finding alternative community service options. Although the police department option has been the best so far because it's really flexible, and they operate on weekends, which is a big deal for people who have jobs. But finding other places for them to go, other things for them to do, that would be ideal. You know, the issue here, of course, is it's a very small town with a very small number of options. And of the options you can think of, you also have to have people willing to kind of supervise, and account for those people. And not a lot of nonprofits want to be responsible for supervising criminal events.
Councilor Mary Day.
Is there a liability connected to the community service? Say if the city used community service to improve landscaping or road repairs, would that?
That would be a question for the city attorney and, insurance.
Thank you, Judge.
Councilor Flack.
So I am noticing from our calendar that we're actually going to do an evaluation on the 11th. And I try to make it to court, and I apologize, I'm not seeing it. Which, you're now doing it twice a month?
Yes,
Or-
on the first and third Thursday.
First and third. And I would recommend we all get a chance to visit court beforehand if possible. Really enlightening. I really appreciate it. I remember the case. I remember former Counselor Boone and I sat through an entire case, and it was really an education. So I'm really appreciative of you and your court, and I would encourage everybody to get that opportunity.
Well, and I would, if people are available, recommend the first Thursday, because the first Thursday is the Thursday for all of the new cases. And so that's where you see this attendance issue I'm talking about. The third Thursday are follow-ups from the first Thursday. So usually it's people who came the first Thursday, they tend to come the next one. So it's not quite the same story on that second.
Councilor Urban.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if it would be possible to hear from our police chief on the use of the community service as directed through the court. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Item B, parking restrictions on Jim Wright Way. Staff report by Public Works Director Faye Stewart.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Over the past few years, I received a sporadic complaint about concerns of the traffic safety or the ability to maneuver through Jim Wright Way at the point where Thornton Lane and Jim Wright Way transition. It's in a corner, and it's right along the Cottage Theater. Over the past 6 months, I received multiple concerns and actually talked with somebody that got into a traffic accident in that same location. And so I asked our city engineer record, branch engineering, Damian Gilbert, to take a look at it and see if he had any concerns or recommendations. I did some preliminary research and found that the street appeared to be about 30 feet wide, so that concerned me of do we have a parking concern there. And his report came back to me and said that his recommendation was to actually remove the parking the entire length of the property line that is along the Jim Wright Way that's adjacent to the theater. I reached out to Mrs. Goes, Susan Goes, who is the executive director for the Cottage Theater, to let her know that the recommendation came back and wanted to know if she had some concerns and set up a time to meet with her. She shared with me on the phone that she was very concerned that this would be absolutely detrimental to the theater's productions because they need that space for parking. What was being recommended was it would have removed about 22 parking spaces through that section. So I went back and discussed the situation at greater length with Mr. Gilbert and felt that we could limit his concerns by reducing the no parking recommendation by about 50%. So what's before you this evening is a recommendation to create a no parking on the northern side of Jim Wright Way on the inside of the corner where it's the narrowest and where it is the hardest to maneuver when there's cars parked on both sides of the street. And I also gave each of you Mrs. Doe's testimony. She was really planning on being here this evening, but was unable to make it. And you can read that if you have any questions. I'm here to answer.
Counselor Black.
So as I'm looking at this item for branch engineering, it looks like the one lane is 14 feet and the other is 20. Is that correct? Is that the way it's striped?
I believe that would be after. So what they're recommending is creating no parking in that corner there where they show it, and then restripe the center lane over from its current location closer to the northern side of the road, allowing a wider travel lane for an 8-foot parking strip and 12-foot travel lane with a 14-foot travel lane on it within the parking area.
So my other question would be, what if we did no parking on the other side of the street? I know that it's a pretty wide opening for Taylor's there. But I mean, if there were no parking on that side, would that accomplish the same thing yet be more beneficial for the theater?
Actually, it doesn't really help the problem that much because the real issue is the visual clearance. People, you get that whole section parked with cars. The real issue is that people can't see other cars coming because of the sharpness of the corner. So it would really not solve the problem. And I did stop by and talk to Mr. Taylor's. I was not able to talk to Patrick due to the fact that his father passed away, but I did get to talk to the staff there, and they said that they would be very supportive of this.
Counselor Savage.
In the letter from Susan, she states that currently the theater staff and actors do park on that north side of the road, but they purposely don't park in front of Taylor's Towing. If we were to move that section and not allow that and take out 11 instead of 22 parking spaces, could they then park on the other side? Could we at least compromise so that they could park on the other side of the street as well?
So Mayor, Councilor Savage, in speaking with Mrs. Goes, she didn't realize that people were parking on the south side of Jim Wright Way where you're recommending, because she has instructed her staff to park on the inside. And once she doesn't come out and see when patrons show up for the plays, and what ends up happening is that site fills. So her direction to her staff is going to be to park on the other side of the street. So they'll start utilizing that, which she thought that she wasn't able to park. But it's not posted, and for some reason she had it in her mind that park on the side of the street.
So if we do remove, just to clarify, we do remove the 11 parking spaces right on that corner, it is taking away those 11 parking spaces. However, they can park on that other side, giving them the space.
That's
And
correct.
The patrons would have to be the ones that would need to figure it out.
Yes, Councilor, that's correct. So the next impacted people are the people that are the patrons that want to listen to play. They're just going to have to park a little further away and find a different place to park.
Counselor Stennett?
Thank you. Would it be the case then that they could park where the staffers aren't, if they're going to park along the curb? Would that replace?
Mary, Councilor Stennett, no, we're going to post that new parking and we're going to paint it, so, and we're going to move the line over so that the areas that we're asking people not to park, those 10 spaces will not be available in the future.
Counselor Meriden?
I think there is adequate parking in the lot that's to the west of here. I've been to a number of shows and I've never seen that lot filled. It's just the people don't want to walk or maybe not able to walk with the elderly crowd. So there is sufficient parking if they could get the staff to park in the west lot as well. But everybody likes door to door, I think.
Mayor, Councilor Meriden, that is a possibility. I would say that parking lot is private property. It is managed by Andy Woodard. And to my knowledge, there's no agreement with the theater to use that for patrons, but that would be a conversation if I was the director of the theater that I would probably go approach and see if that would be available parking. I do know that there are patrons that do park there and walk across, and they're not, I don't think that they're deterred from parking.
Counselor Fleck?
With that, I will move that the council approve Branch Engineering's no parking recommendation for Jim Wright Way.
Second.
Got a motion with a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, concerns from council. Counselor Urban.
Please.
Oh, Counselor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question. Maybe I'll wait till this is brought up when we're talking about the updated council rules. When there is public comment, there's a space for our mayor to say, is there anything else for the city staff? Do we need to address anything? I almost would find that handy to have in here as a line item, and I didn't know how everybody else felt, but that came to mind, so I can hold that conversation off for the next topic. The other thing,
Let
do
me,
you want to comment?
let me try to respond to that
Sure.
right now, if I could. I think that was in the context of a public hearing, which is in fact how those are conducted. Typically, there's staff report, public comment, and then closing response from staff. I think that's what you're referencing.
So I think I did say public hearing, but just at the very, very beginning, item 4, when folks come in and they want to talk on something not on the agenda. So I did say public hearing, but if somebody brings something, then we're directed to maybe comment again.
With
that make sense?
respect to public comment, it's just general.
Just right after, yeah,
Right
right
after
after
the
public
agenda.
comments. If that could be a line item, but maybe not. Maybe nobody else feels that way, and that's okay.
Certainly something that can be inserted in the rules. The rules, well, we're not asking you to adopt those tonight. I'll spend more time with that.
Okay. So just the thought that I had, I don't know if it would be helpful for you, Mayor, but that's where my brain went. I wanted to kind of check something off. I'm really excited to go to National League of Cities on Wednesday. I'll be leaving Wednesday with Councilor Fleck. We're going to Atlanta. There's lots of sessions I'm really eager to dive into. I'm really interested about one that they have, human-centered approaches to address homelessness. So while we have to abide by the Ninth Circuit Court, I'm curious as to what the National League of Cities is bringing to the table. So it's very clear to me that this is a national issue and not just a Cottage Grove issue, Oregon issue, Ninth Circuit Court issue. This is clearly a bigger picture. I don't know how relevant it's going to be since they don't necessarily follow the Ninth Circuit Court, but I'm interested in knowing more. There's reimagining commercial spaces. Housing is another one I'm interested in. good neighbors, helping communities advance housing affordability solutions, and addressing root causes of mental health and substance abuse. So I'm really eager to dive into lots of knowledge and drink from that fire hose again, and I'll come back with a report.
Councilor Irvin?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll give a quick update from the Lane Economic Committee meeting that was held today. We had Eco Northwest present. They were commissioned by the Chamber of Commerce in Eugene to do a cost analysis of on the Lane County basis for homelessness efforts, and to make policy recommendations to that effect. So I can get a report on that if you'd like. I'm largely left with more questions than information, I feel like, after that. So I think I'd do a disservice trying to convey that right now. Other than the recommendation is essentially to double the budget at a bare minimum, and point it towards the mostly permanent housing. So like I said, I'll be happy to pass the report along once I get that. On a different topic, I have been talking with a constituent and kind of excited about recommendations that I feel in line with. You know, we do a city. Well, the concept is, how do we raise the standard, around us? Well, it starts with what we do ourselves, and then there can be added helps, facilitated on a city level to do that, that have benefit. Certainly, we do leaf pickup, that helps streets, maintain the maintenance, storm, or other systems. And this idea was not a new idea, but a citywide cleanup, organizing a citywide cleanup, maybe biannually, where there would be a function of being able to coordinate community efforts, community service, but maybe dumpsters could be provided. Say there's lots that people just can't get the junk out. There could be an offering to not just branches, but your recyclables and garbage and scrap and whatever else. But I'd like to work towards organizing and work in concert with anyone that's interested in organizing that to just generally raise the standard of what's going on around us, and see what role the city could come alongside with that. I ran into an issue just personally it was about a year ago or so, where there seems to be potentially a gap in our building code, to where certain dwellings or zonings, you can have 2 livable spaces. You can't have 3, but you can have 4. Just the way that it hits the different section of code, I think becomes that 4 cottage cluster. I'd like that to be brought forward to see if we can address that gap. I think there could be positive impact there, certainly from a housing stock alleviation. And then this last one, I'd like to have that conversation about our courts. I'm really upset to hear the state of affairs with accountability. I'm with you, Councilor Fleck. I don't want to see it go away because I want accountability. I want to live in a culture and a society that we hold each other to high standards, and we do so systematically through our pooled resource, through the courts, under the rule of law. And I think it's a sad state of affairs of what it looks like. And I want to be as creative as possible, see what we can do. But if it's going to continue down to less and less accountability and our hands are tied on a regional or state level or something, then I'd rather see $155,000 go towards infrastructure or something. I want to have that conversation. So that's all I'm saying right now. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
Well, that's a good segue. I wanted to bring up the jail situation, the court system as well, and accountability. And I'd love to get that on our goal setting to possibly brainstorm some ideas and see what we can do as far as that goes. Because what's happening is disheartening and scary, to be truthful. And I'll leave that at that until we can get to it. But I just have actually a lighthearted little thing that I got to do on Sunday. I got to go and give the awards for the Special Olympics here in Cottage Grove and for their bowling. And I was amazed. They were bowling like 250, and I can't even imagine bowling that well. And they were disappointed. And today, Chief Chase and I had the opportunity to go speak at Lincoln Middle School on kindness, and that was a lot of fun. And the chief can attest to how quiet those kids got when we spoke, and it was pretty amazing. And quite a few of them came up and high-fived us after, and it was really sweet. Really enjoyed it. And thank you, Chief, for taking the time to do that. And that is all for me. Oh, Chris. Counselor Mary Day.
Yeah, I just wanted to report from the Cottage Grove Community Development Corporation. Last Thursday, they had the kickoff to their business challenge, and we had 19 people signed up for the course and 25 applicants to participate in the prize. There's going to be real money for a startup at the end of the journey, and this is one of the ways that the city has supported the RAIN, and an outcome is to get people out of their kitchens and into a brick and mortar business by promoting, helping them develop their business plan and their skills to go from being the part-time to full-time in their business. So.
Counselor Flack.
So I guess I should mention, I have both LRAPA and Lane Area Commission on Transportation meetings. LRAPA, it's funny, we were talking about looking at costs. Air Metrics is a program that they have had forever. One of their workers created a way of testing air quality and ended up selling it worldwide. For years, it was just huge. We have about $1 million reserve fund in that. But it's been trending down for technology, COVID, supply chain issues. And so we're facing whether we continue Air Metrics or not. And so that'll be coming up in our next meeting. We normally don't meet in December. We will be. We're also looking for doing an executive director search. And so we're also going to be doing that at our next meeting. Lane Area Commission on Transportation. I'm a little frustrated because I was involved in this way back when it was, brought into being. And back then, there was the perception that there were some politics going on because Lane County commissioners, and I see Cindy Wheeldryer over there smirking, the commissioners were the ones who used to say, and in the STIP, the state transportation plan, how those funds were allocated here in our local area. And so this commission was created to allocate those funds. And I just found that about 5 or 6 years ago, that was actually taken away from the acts and moved the chain to the Oregon Transportation Commission. And so I was a little frustrated by that I didn't get that. And I'm going to own that. I'm not sure if that's on me or not, but I will be looking through our bylaws and see, what the value is. Director Stewart did this big exercise for us, and that wasn't quite what I expected. So I'm being a little feisty with them, as you can't possibly imagine, about some clearer expectations of what it is that body does. And so I will give you an update as we go. I mean, like I said, I know there's value there. I just need to kind of conceptualize and understand what that role is now compared to what it was when I was involved in that years and years ago. Anyway, thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Business from the city manager. Item A, proposed 2023 updated council rules, staff report by or in the room. Mr. Klein.
Okay, so you have in your packets from myself, a staff report that summarizes some changes that were added to the changes that you'd already had worked through. So you have a copy of the council rules as they were reworked through your efforts and with the city attorney's help. I've added some comments and suggested changes based on what I'm understanding where this council wants to go with how it manages its meetings in general. So that's mostly the nature of the changes I've suggested. I've also addressed tried to address what I believe was the concerns that were raised about use of social media outside of or just your roles outside of the city council as individual councilors. I tried to address that a little bit in these rules so there's a clear understanding what that's about and what best practices are there. So that appears in these rules. There's some changes that I've suggested. I think the city attorney may not be entirely agreeing with. So I think you need to probably take a good look at the two sets that you have. But beyond that, I would strongly urge you to convene a separate study session in which to take these up. It'll be difficult planning that from the end of this year while I'm here, so you can certainly try and squeeze something in, but we're running out of meeting space for that. I know you had a comment from council.
Councilor Stammer.
I would just, thank you. I just definitely think we could accomplish a lot with the work session with the work that's already been done and kind of conceptualizing a lot of what we may want to change. It seems we could be quite effective.
So I'm again struggling to hear you.
Sorry, I don't have my little fuzzy guy, so I'm pretty breathy, and I didn't want to.
It's over here. I don't know why.
Okay.
We'll pass the fuzzy guy around.
As long as it remains a fuzzy.
I didn't want to boom either, so.
But I'm doing well with whatever you're doing now.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, it's so much better. Golly.
I have my fuzzy guy.
I would think that based on the work you've done here and the work that the counselors attempted to do at the last, in 2021, we could get pretty far and be pretty effective with a work session. I would totally support that. So.
City attorney.
I just wanted to add, so that we all understand that the 2021 track change version, it went to a subcommittee, and then it came to the council who was not happy with some of those changes. So I don't want anybody to be under the misimpression that there was buy-in on those 2021 changes. I do want to point out they have been incorporated into the 2023 changes. So just be really clear, like you need to see them both as, there's two sets of proposed changes. There isn't one set that's been accepted and the second set that's more recent.
At the end of the day, these are your rules. So when you do find the time to sit down with 2021, 2023, you can abandon all of those. This is just your set of rules. I would suggest that you work through it one section at a time. Like it, dislike it, modify it, and come together on it. But I think at the end of the day, this does form the core of what a typical set of rules would look like, and it governs, it governs your behavior, provides the expectations for the public, and it provides the format for you to consider running your meetings, I think in an effective way. Again, but this is your set of rules. If you don't like, please, there's parts that you don't like, please reject. It's yours.
So set up a work session for January. Is that what we're thinking? Or are we wanting to do it before?
So I have a quick question, because I know that Councilor Urban and I are kind of passionate about this, and I was going to recommend a subcommittee. But if the whole council wants to do that, I mean, I'm totally on board with that. It's just, I thought if we had something prepared that then is, has some smaller tweaks having a subcommittee of us, of whoever a very passionate person might be, to come up with a draft. Because I know Councilor Urban in that one, around freedom of speech issues, if I remember right, was one of the big hangups. And that was not the intent to stifle conversation, just to make sure that it was clarified and was done. And if that needs to be tweaked, boy, I totally support that. But like I said, I can go either direction with whatever the council wants. I just know that not everybody's kind of a geek on that sort of stuff like I may be. So I'm happy to do that with whoever.
Counselor Stennett?
Thanks. I don't think I'm opposed to a subcommittee. I just think it's gonna necessitate a broader council conversation anyway. I mean, I think everyone has, regardless of whether they're wonky about the finer points, everybody's gonna have their opinions on this. I just think that's why we could sit down and hammer it out, given a framework to do so by Mr. Klein and by the 2021 subcommittee. So that was my notion.
Counselor Savage?
Thank you, Mayor. We're already scheduled to be here all day, Friday, December 15th. Is that all utilized in meeting time already, or can we block out 2 hours somewhere within that time to meet? If we're already going to be here, we might as well be here.
I wouldn't recommend it. So what you'll be doing during that period of time, you'll spend probably the entire morning in interviews. I don't know how many finalists you'll have, but I imagine you're looking at a 4 to 5 hour block of time with interviews. Sometime after that, you're going to convene into executive session and discuss what you've heard and hopefully come to some kind of consensus as to which direction you want to go and give your staff direction at that point, or your consultant direction at that point. That's a big day. That's a lot to do in one day. And I think adding another 2 hours of pretty substantial work that might surround these rules, you may not have the brain power left to do that. No offense. I wouldn't.
And I'll be honest, I don't think 2 hours is enough time. I know we met our committee with Mayor Dowling, Councilor Roberts, and myself. I think we met, with our attorney at least twice, 3 times. I was going to say.
Each time, it's probably 2 hours.
Right. So, I think that was my recommendation, is that I do think it's quite a process.
Yeah, I'm looking at the jumping ahead to the future agenda items. I don't see any room before the new year to fit that in, unless we did another special meeting.
What's the consensus here? You guys want to set something up in January?
Yeah.
So we can, if you guys are ready to do that. Yeah, I do have 1 week. I won't be able to. Let's do that.
So, Mayor, the staff can help you with that one. You'll have a city recorder back some point in time.
Perfect. All righty.
Sorry, one more question. Is that something that you're going to be able to attend? Are we going to coordinate so that you're able to go
I'll have
as
to
well?
check the service from Costa Rica and see how good it is.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Klein, I was talking about Ms. Conlon.
I would hope to be invited. I would be happy to attend if invited. So if that's the will of the council, I will be there. If you guys would prefer to talk amongst yourselves and get kind of a message and then bring me in, that's fine as well.
So yeah, on that point, if you can clarify, one of the major impetus behind the first rollout of that, as I recall, was the advent of the online. What exposure do we have right now by not having something formalized or codified? Because that was like get this done right now because we're doing these online meetings, but we've been operating this way.
I think that the policy of having so it is, so sorry. So your policy is set, it's just not in your rules. And so there is kind of an overlay of the way that virtual meetings or virtual attendance has operated ever since advent of COVID. And it carried over into now we have to have the opportunity to participate virtually. So I'm not concerned. I'd rather have you get it right rather than just push something through because as you say, you have been operating for, where are we?
The whole time.
2020, well, coming up on 4 years.
So is that in the electronic communications policy specifically?
No, it is more in a, I cannot remember exactly. It's like an administrative policy that the city manager at the time worked on to ensure this is how we're going to sign up for meetings. This is how we're going to make sure that those who want to participate virtually can and that we know about it.
I would just request that that policy be made available at the time that we work through those rules.
Report from city manager.
Just want to echo, it's in your interest to have the city attorney there with you to do the work.
It's all right.
So start off with an apology. We almost had a quorum at 5:30 today because we had in our earlier version of our pending council agenda, we had a work session listed that was removed to December 8th. And so I don't know that we gave you a proper heads up about the change. Certainly 3 of you didn't get that message. So again, apologies on that, and we will continue to work on improving. We have the new tools. Now we just need to train ourselves and use them properly. So there you have that. You will receive, if you have not already received shortly, the form of the evaluation before the judge. So it'll be what you've received in the past. So I would urge you, don't feel the need to fill in every single point of evaluation. There are things that you just will not be competent in understanding about the court and what it's doing. And so don't feel like you have to do that. I would just go to the places that you feel comfortable in terms of completing the evaluation, collect the information amongst yourselves, and manage it as you have previously. That's my recommendation to you on that evaluation. You have the rules. We've talked about that. Let me tell you where we stand on the selection process. So we are still scheduled for just November 27 for an executive session with your consultant, GMP. They've received enough applications to continue the process forward. So they've started their round of, I think they've started their round of preliminary interviews for screening some of the candidates and getting you a list of folks that they believe you ought to consider to further winning the list and to further to provide you your best choice of candidates to meet the qualifications. So that's ongoing. That will be on November 27th. So that's your next council meeting. You should be visiting with them, and that'll be an executive session at the end of the meeting, which, by the way, you'll be able to conduct in the meeting facility behind you, so that you won't need to kick everybody out of the council chambers. They can stay warm, and you'll have plenty of space to meet and converse. And a reminder on that meeting also, there is a 6 o'clock work session scheduled for that day as well. So that is a pedestrian plan work session. That's for 6 p.m. on the 27th. Reminder also, again, December 8th on the planning session, your agenda planning session, that'll be immediately followed by the rescheduled hazardous mitigation work session. So you have a couple work sessions pending. We're going to keep you busy until the holidays. The price to be paid for taking the one day off, you'll have 3 or 4 on. So, and then finally on the interview process, we're still continuing with the plan that the community would get to meet the candidates, the finalists, on the 14th evening. I believe the evening of the 14th, there'll be some form of community meet and greet. And the next day will be a busy day for the candidates and yourselves, where you will be interviewing the finalists as well as any other panels that are designated to help you with that process. And then with any kind of, if all works out well, sometime towards the end of that day, you will be able to select your lead candidate and begin and give staff and your consultant direction as to what the negotiations should look like. That is the tentative plan that has been presented in the past, and it continues to be the plan for your selection. You're looking at, all goes well, January 8th, you'll have a contract to consider for your new city manager. And relocation will be dependent on the candidate if it requires relocation. Other items on my list of things, let's see, talked about that. Oh, on the act, I think it came up in the past meeting or two, there was a conversation about who should be an alternate. I would strongly urge you to select the city manager as your alternate, and they can designate whoever they choose that's pertinent with staff to sit in on those meetings. So you'll have that continuity. The act, the area commission on transportation. We have completed our contract with Elaine Howard to start the work on the urban renewal feasibility work, so that is going to be underway here shortly. Let's see, and I guess I want to pick up on a couple comments tonight, mostly from the perspective of if you have your issue tracker, is there something from those conversations that you want to add in? I sense that if nothing else you wanted on that list was some further conversation with respect to what Judge raised with respect to the jails and general accountability. If you'll, staff can pick that up again tomorrow morning. We can circle back with you with something that you may be able to add to your tracker, depending on what that further work would look like. That's a difficult issue, and there's a lot of pieces to that issue, and so that won't be a simple one or other solution. It's going to expect it to be tad complicated. So, but let us take a crack at that tomorrow, and I suspect you want that back on the issue tracker. Was there anything else tonight? I know there was a few comments that came up. Was there anything that you felt like there was a consensus of this council that you wanted to add to that issue tracker?
I was putting forth the idea of a citywide cleanup effort and the city's involvement. I was wanting to know if there was general consensus on getting some feedback on that, what that might look like. Is that something? Hearing that. So let me add court, jail, and cleanup. I suspect that my recommendation to you is going to be that if there was that the city should play a role, of course, but hopefully there's some one of the volunteer organizations out there that would like to take the lead and get the recognition for cheerleading that effort. So whether it's a chamber, downtown association, Kiwanis, or whatever, that would say, come to the city and say, we can round up X number of volunteers to do this work if the city would pay, for instance, for the roll-offs that are needed to pick it up, or the garbage collection services can jump in and do whatever they do. I mean, different cities handle that in different ways, but largely that tends to be a community event, community organized, and a community kind of party. So that is probably what we'll circle back to. But I don't want to preempt that too much. Fantastic. The last thing I saw Mr. Monge nod his head on it, but to keep just to look at least the perceived hole in the building code for that third livable dwelling space issue, if there's consensus on seeing if that can be rectified, or if that is even a thing.
Okay. Is there anything else that came up tonight that you want us to add to this tracker, or I think that, again, consensus council? I think feel strong.
Maybe not anything new, but can we see about some kind of community input with regard to the jail and the court system? It seems to me quite a catch-22 that if we haven't been able to the level that we need to catch people, then we can't hold them accountable. But if we aren't catching them, then we also don't know how much crime is happening. We might need the community to help us figure that out. How safe are we? How safe do we need to be? How safe do we need to feel we are? I don't know if that's, if a component of that can be added to that discussion too.
Yeah, so again, it's gonna be a kind of a complicated issue, I think, for us. It's not one that we shouldn't talk about, that just because it's complicated, but it's just, you know, the issues are collections, the issues are, you know, again, accountability, the issues of what is, I don't know how the courts handle these things. You know, I heard what the judge said, I haven't heard from the police department. There's how you ultimately, old folk, people, how you get better behavior from people is really what you're shooting for, right? That's a reduction in the incidence of crime.
Sure. And it strikes the heart of who we are as a community. I mean, what standard are we holding each other to? I mean, it's who we are as a group of people. It's a big deal. So
Again, there's a lot of ways to approach that question. I've done some criminal justice planning in the past. We tackle that issue on a large regional basis. There's a lot of measures of success. We need to find out what it is, how you define success, and then, you know, how we get there. Is success doing better collections? Is success putting more people in jail? Is success improving community behavior, reducing crime? Now, I suspect it's more the latter than anything else, but you haven't had that conversation yet. We haven't started it with you. So that's why we need to kind of take that, come back to you and say what we think the scope of the issue is that we can throw on here for you.
thank you.
Yep.
On another line, my question is about the natural hazard mitigation work session. Is that renewing, like reiterating our existing plan, extending it, revisiting it? What's the substance and how can we better be prepared for that?
Good evening, Mayor, Councilor Dreher. So yes, it is a renewal of a 5-year natural hazard mitigation plan. We are a little bit in a gap right now regarding our existing plan, which did expire in 22. But we are very close to the finish line. That's my understanding that the state and FEMA are reviewing the draft as it is right now. The work session with you all next month will be to just kind of weigh any other changes that you see or opportunities, weights in some of the evaluations on the particular hazards. And then from that, we'll wrap up that component of the public outreach and then send out the final draft for acceptance by the Department of Emergency Management.
Can we see the draft right now? Is that FEMA's looking at?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to provide it.
That's right after the agenda session.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Report from the city attorney.
Hi, good evening. I don't have a lot to talk about, but I did want to touch on I don't know how many of you actually received the CIS, your insurer issues a real-time risk newsletter periodically. I don't receive it, but this month we got about 75 from our various city clients, staff, terrified because their headline was Oregon's higher courts ends recreational immunity for improved trails. That isn't the case. It's a little bit of an overstatement. So there was a case that came out in July. Yeah, early July. Yep, the Newport case. And it entailed a bridge that was used, it was on city property and so it crossed from regular public right of ways across city property to access the beach, which is state. And it was really slippery. And a woman warned her friend after they walked their dogs on the beach that this is very slippery, be careful, right before she herself fell and broke her leg. And the worst part was that the EMTs, when they tried to access her, could not get the gurney across. It was that slippery. So it was really bad facts. And what happened is at the trial court said, oh, recreational immunity, the city has this immunity defense. So we're dismissing them before we even look at any of the facts. So they dismissed it on summary judgment. The Court of Appeals said, we don't know if she was using the bridge for recreational purposes. So we're sending it back to trial court to determine what the woman's intent was as she crossed this bridge after having walked her dog on the beach. CIS is very concerned because they like recreational immunity. They like to have things taken care of before they have to pay a litigator to try facts. It is very helpful to have this immunity defense available, but it remains available. So I just kind of wanted to reassure anybody who had heard about this. It may affect city premiums. We don't really know, but in essence, a good attorney said you have to prove recreational intent. That hasn't changed. That's always been there. And so that wasn't determined by the trial court. And therefore, it needs to go back to determine whether she was using that little connector for recreational purposes. That's the long and the short of it. Then we have talked about the judge evaluation, but I think we're going to talk about that in a future meeting, correct? Okay. All right. So that's all for me tonight, unless anyone has questions.
All right. Well, with that, the meeting is adjourned.